So I've had this idea for a while for a Warhammer 40,000 army themed around one of my favorite sci-fi universes, Dune. With a new movie coming out later this year, what better way to start off the hype than to tackle this project now? Other than some models that I got secondhand from Marketplace or eBay, I'll be designing and printing a lot of my own bits to use for this conversion. Now let's talk about some of the tech we're going to use to get this kitbash started. Alright, so you know in Star Trek when any of the crew want something to eat, they just walk up to a wall and ask for any sort of food they imagine and it just materializes in front of them? We have that, but for miniature tabletop games. Anything you can imagine through a series of slightly more involved steps. You can have a physical, detailed piece of plastic at your fingertips in less time than it would take Amazon to ship to you. And I mean anything. Now, the detail still isn't quite the same as molded plastic, but only if you regularly use a microscope and like posting giant close-up images of your miniatures on Instagram. For anything a normal human eye can see, I honestly can't tell the difference between these two. And yes, before you say it, I know it's not as simple as pressing a button. You do need to learn a bit about the printers themselves, whether they're FDM or SLA like this one. You have to learn how to properly shake the resin before pouring it into the vat. You have to make sure you're printing on a level surface. You have to follow a set of recommended settings for the resin and color that you are using. You have to pick the right model, orientation, and supports that will ensure physics is on your side to get a successful print. It did take me 2 or 3 prints to figure out I should be adding adequate supports for the models I was printing. I opted to go for medium supports in most cases, and it worked fine. You also need to clean, cure, and prep your prints after they're done. Hey, if you've purchased and assembled any model kits, you're used to this type of work already. You clip bits, clean mold lines, glue bits together. You follow a complex set of instructions and sometimes kitbash parts as well. I wonder if it's cheaper to buy a 2,000 point army or to buy a 3D printer and print one out. In any case, when I reached out to Elegoo and told them about this project, they sent me this Mars 2 Pro Mono to try out. And they even included a coupon code for a limited time for any of you that want to dive into this part of the hobby. If you do a bit of digging, there's a ton of free sculpts, and actually most of the professionally sculpted models are very reasonably priced as well. Best of all, you can make your own creations. You can design and print right in your home using free software like Blender or many others. You can even digitally kitbash parts before you print them. For most of the bits I made in this video, I tackled it using an Oculus Rift and Adobe Medium. You may have seen this used by Jazza in the past, as well as other creators. I think he used it to sculpt a giant version of a Space Marine. Now, it's totally usable for small scale stuff too, and the resolution of today's resin printers can keep up for tabletop standards. This program comes free if you own an Oculus Rift. I've actually had mine for years, mostly collecting dust. So I knew I wanted an Astra Militarum army as the base of my army. These are the guys without any special powers in the Warhammer 40k universe. They just have laser guns and they're regular conscripts from the Empire. They're just humans. I've got a bunch of these Cadian infantry models from various sources, and they're going to be my starting stock. I didn't really like how the Cadian infantry has these bulky heads though with those helmets, so we're going to try and fix that first. Now, Oculus Medium works through a series of stamps, and you can actually import any STL that you can download, and you can kitbash it virtually with other parts that you want, or you can sculpt your own. So, going online, I'd found a bunch of random heads that were either free or open to modification. And this doesn't really matter much. I was just using it for the proportions of the nose, eyes, and face, to the point where it would be sort of recognizable as a face. It gives a good starting reference. The Oculus program actually includes some reference heads as well, which I did use. Hey, here's an idea. If you get some 3D scans of your friends' faces, you could even print them and put them in your army. From there, I 3D sculpted some face masks, helmets, goggles, and by putting these on different layers, I was able to turn them on and off in various combinations to get some different variation of heads. I was having so much fun that I actually got a bit carried away, and I ended up making full sculpts of both a male and a female variant, inspired heavily from the Fremen stillsuit. I think these are going to form the elite squadrons of my army. By chopping the models at the hips and the head, it lets me print off multiple torsos and legs individually. And then, when gluing them together, I can get a lot more variation than just printing the whole model at once. As I was putting them together, I gave them various weapon options, as the Fremen warriors will be my veteran squad. They can use plasma, sniper rifles, flamethrowers, you name it. I found some parts online that work quite well as stand-ins for the Warhammer 40k equivalent counterparts. Oh look, I even gave my sergeants a bolt gun and a power sword. No upgrade sprue necessary. The models I designed myself will be linked down in the description if you want to have a go at kitbashing with them as well. And I also printed off some single arms holding pistols and daggers. These would work well for my officers. After some initial bed leveling from getting the printer and pouring in some resin, I was ready to start printing these models. I initially tried using Kitbash, which is the software that comes recommended for slicing, but later switched to Litchi, which seems to perform much better. Kitbash was giving me a lot of trouble in terms of being slow to update on the models I was loading in, but Litchi just breezed through them. Some gotchas I had, which led to some failed prints, were figuring out what support settings to use. I've settled on using the automatic supports for the most part, just choosing the medium setting and letting it auto reorient my pieces. I then also scanned for islands. That means the part of the model that starts printing in midair. You don't want that. So adding support to all of these ensures a good print. From there, it's just a matter of putting the files on the provided USB stick and hitting print on the printer. Now, a failed print is classified as anytime you get bits that separate from your plate or your supports and they end up in the vat while it's printing. If this happens, it's not the end of the world. You just need to empty out the vat, take the parts out, and refill. And if you're doing a lot of printing, you actually don't need to empty the vat between prints. I think I only emptied the vat when I had failures, and otherwise just kept printing with the resin that was in there. I think Elegoo recommends that if you're not going to print for over 48 hours, you should drain the vat, so there's that to consider. Now, I was a bit wary of having to do lots of cleaning with isopropyl alcohol and other chemicals, so I just opted to get some of this water-washable resin instead. Cleanup is quite easy using this. After separating the print from the plate, I can dunk it in a yogurt container of water and then plop it in an ultrasonic cleaner. Oh yeah, I got this ultrasonic cleaner. I figured I would get this instead of one of the wash and cure stations, since I can also use it to strip secondhand models of paint as well. Alright, once all the uncured resin is washed off, I set it up in my super sophisticated UV lamp setup. It's just a cardboard box lined with tinfoil, and a turntable and a cheap UV lamp from Amazon as well. 3 to 4 minutes is apparently pretty long enough to cure this type of resin. And alright, now we have a ton of detailed bits to start kitbashing with. We've got grenades, weapons, tech-looking backpacks. Oh boy. Now I can't use my usual plastic glue for this since the resin does not bond with it, but using a little bit of super glue to assemble the models works well. I decapitated a lot of the GW Cadian models in preparation for the conversion, and used a Dremel to hollow out the neck to accept the new heads. I actually didn't have enough 25mm bases for the new models, so I 3D printed some of those too. I designed them myself. I made them approximately the same dimensions and shape as the others, so you can't really tell the difference unless you flip the base over. Now you will notice I included a little hole here. That's where a magnet can slot in easily, as I wanted to magnetize all my infantry for easy transport and for using most of my magnetized painting handles. Now with the models all assembled, it's time to base them. I chose to do this at this stage and then paint the models and bases in their full configurations. I know others like to do sub-assemblies or paint the bases separately, but this is just the way I do it. I use a combination of sand, tile grout, and small rocks sealed in with watered down Mod Podge. This is similar to how I'd flock some of the terrain pieces I make. Consulting reference images and lore on House Atreides, their primary colors are green, black, and red. As they will be fighting mostly in the desert, I'll be choosing light brown and tan as my main colors, to let them camouflage into the desert landscape easier. Before painting the whole army, I isolated 2 or 3 models to practice paint schemes on. For the Acadian infantry models with the head swaps, I settled on this scheme. Greens and reds are very muted, so they don't overpower the model and give off a Christmas elf vibe. And the Fremen veterans got a much simpler paint scheme. A dark black with tints of dark green sprayed from underneath, and then just simply dry brushed with tan to get a dusty appearance, as they would get from prolonged wear in the desert. After isolating the steps needed to get to this look, I just started batch painting the rest of my models. First an airbrush of tan from above and a dark brown from underneath, then picking out all the details in green, pants, straps, etc. Then picking out the red details, scarves, buttons. Skin came next. Various skin colors as well. Got some good tones and variety there. Then using some gray and metallic for the weapons and other gear. The Fremen warriors even got some glowing blue eyes, or at least my attempt at it. And everything got a really heavy dusting of tan dry brush and pigment powders. So much sand. Oh, bonus tip. Here's a neat way of doing small grass tufts. Take a non-stick surface like a silicone pad or baking paper and drizzle some dots of PVA glue or Mod Podge. Then you sprinkle some static grass down. Once dry, you have these tiny grass patches that you can scrape off and apply individually. They're not as detailed as some of the tufts you can buy, but they look nice nonetheless. I like them. Batch painting a full army like this, so there's a lot of repetitive steps involved. But the end result is worth it, I think. Once you look at all the models and see them laid out on a table, oof, that's awesome. But this isn't enough to field an army just yet. Next up, I gotta work on some tanks and other vehicles. So, subscribe and watch for the next video in the series if you want to see me do more of this. If you want to see more close-up shots of all the infantry, just click here. See ya.